Ateneo parents as we share stories of service, solidarity, and the magic in everyday parenting. Hey Spaces, your story, your voice, your space. Only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Radyo, 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 Radyo.
We all want to live healthier in mind, body, and spirit. But where do we start? Sometimes all it takes is a good conversation. Tune in to Wellness Wednesdays on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. Together with experts, inspiring guests, and real stories, we explore tips you can actually use. From managing stress, to eating better, to finding balance in a busy world. Because here, we believe wellness isn't just about living longer, it's about living better. So join us, and let's make every Wednesday a step toward your healthiest self. Wellness Wednesdays, wellness that speaks to you. From the body, mind, to might. Every Wednesday on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Just Calm Music Ministry. Music that uplifts the soul. Follow Just Calm PH on Spotify and Just Calm Music on YouTube. We are also on iTunes and Deezer.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan.
Coming up next, CURA, Conversations on Care, Health, and Healing on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay Atenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng kwela. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero, sugod, todo sa kayod, dunong at tulog. Lipat na Blue Eagle, kaning giting nagigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan.
Health isn't just about medicine,
It's about care
community,
and conversation. That's why Radyo Katipunan brings you CURA, your campus medical show.
From everyday wellness tips to expert advice on the health issues that matter most to you.
CURA is here to listen, guide, and care
The Ateneo Way.
Join us as we talk about healing
Hope and health right here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
CURA, your campus health companion where care meets conversation.
Magandang gabi, Ateneo, and welcome back to CURA Conversations on Care, Health, and Healing. I'm Dr. Tippy Sumpay-Cotanchanco.
And I'm Dr. Jello Apostol. Great to be back with all of you. And Dr. P, I know today's episode is especially close to your heart, right?
Super, Jello. It really is. Today, we're talking about caring for family members with autism, a topic I deal with very often as a developmental pediatrician, and I'm glad you're here because while my perspective is very clinical, you bring that broader lens of how environment and community shape health across the lifespan.
Absolutely, Dr. P. And when we talk about, autism and neurodiversity, we're not just talking about individual health, di ba?
True.
We're talking about how our communities, our schools, our public spaces even can
Yes.
either include or maybe exclude people with different needs. And I think at the end of the day, it's about building a society that works for everyone, whatever your shape, size, color is, right?
Agree ako dyan, Jello. Yung konteksto, di ba? Yung context is actually very important. But before we introduce our guest, let me share why this conversation matters. In the Philippines, we're seeing more and more children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Not just because autism is increasing necessarily, but because we're actually getting better at recognizing, no? Pero sandali, actually tumataas din daw po ang prevalence of autism.
Oh, wow.
Actually, wala tayong data. Yun yung medyo nakakasad, no? Kaya mamaya magpa-plug din ako sa study namin kasi kailangan natin gumawa ng research. Yan. Pero sa states po, 1 in 31 na ang number of individuals with autism.
1 in 31, that's a lot.
Parang kung may classroom ka, 30 in a classroom, merong isa na merong autism. When you think of it that way, diba? So, marami yun.
Wow.
Marami yun. Tapos, chances are, may encounter nyo talaga.
Yeah.
Diba? So, pati sa classroom, sa mga schools natin.
Co-workers as well, di ba?
Co-workers, yes. So, ngayon, may good news din tayo kasi early recognition means early intervention and early support. But here's what I see in my clinic every day. A lot of times, parents can be confused. So, yung episode nga natin ngayon, marami tayong mga tanong. Parang ginather din natin yung mga tanong ng parents. They become confused, they become overwhelmed. Sa simula, syempre may denial din kasi yan, no? And siblings who don't understand why their brother or sister is different, medyo marami rin silang pagdadaanan. And sometimes, ito pa yung pandagdag, extended family who give unsolicited advice.
Naku, mahirap
diba?
yan.
Oo. Or minsan nga, hindi lang extended family, pati yung kapitbahay, yung barangay captain, ang dami nating mga advice na nakukuha. So, lalong nakukonfuse po yung mga parents natin. And ngayon, marami na rin tayong autism advocates. These are individuals with autism themselves, and they try to navigate this world of ours that doesn't always understand them.
And you know what, Dr. P, that navigation piece is very crucial. Kasi, our episode today, it's less about having a clinical conversation about autism, although we'll try to cover that. Instead, we're having a real conversation about what it's like to live with someone who has autism, as a family member, as a caregiver, and as a sibling. And we'll talk about the challenges, but also I think the joys, the unexpected gifts, and the deep love that families develop. And hopefully, from this conversation, we'll be able to share to our listeners some practical strategies that we can use starting today.
Yes. So, ngayong gabi po, maswerte tayo sa ating guest. Siya po talaga yung expert kasi siya yung kasama ni Miguel. So, talagang expert po siya, no? So, let me introduce to you our guest. Anya Santiago is a psychology student dito po sa Ateneo de Manila. And she is also the ate she's a sibling caregiver, and she helps take care of her younger brother, Miguel. So, Anya, maraming salamat. Thank you for agreeing to join us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. P, Doc Jello. I'm a bit nervous, but I'm very excited to share our family story.
Nako, don't be nervous, Anya, no? Just
Okay
think
lang
of
yan.
this as a
Chika lang tayo.
chika conversation, no? And I think to Dr. P's point, no, your perspective as a sibling is so valuable. There's so much to it, di ba? The
yan,
pressures,
Doc
the
Jello.
experiences, but maybe even the joys, no? And I think it's your voice, no, that we don't often hear enough. So we're glad that you're here, Anya.
Thank you so much.
Ayan. Thank you, Anya. So, siguro, bago tayo magsimula, tell us about your brother, how old he is, and when was he diagnosed?
Alright, so my brother's name is Miguel. He is currently 20 years old. He was diagnosed at a little over 2 years old, so that was back in 2007.
Tagal na pala, no?
Yes. And how it happened was when my parents scheduled a consult with a developmental pediatrician, they said that Miguel had global developmental delay and that he needed a lot of intervention. So that's how he was eventually diagnosed with autism.
And siguro, Dr. before we continue with the conversation, Anya, I just have to say thank you, for having the courage to come here to our show here in CURA to talk about your story, your family story. I guess before we ask further questions, bakit ka pumayag? I mean, I know this might be a difficult conversation, pero ako nabigla nga ako. May pumayag, Doc Tepi, di ba? So,
diba?
But Anya, what gave you, I guess, the courage to say yes to having this conversation with us?
Kasi hindi po ako makahindi kay Doc Tepi.
Nako, si Doc Tepi pala.
So, talaga sa love kita. Love ko kayo. Yes.
But more than that po, I believe that at this point, acceptance and accommodation for people with autism should be the goal. We should be way past yung autism awareness lang. As advocates, we should use our platforms like this to help other families who are going through similar experiences, reducing the stigma against persons with autism, and of course, creating a more inclusive society for PWTs in general.
Ang ganda nun.
Galing.
Diba parang it's really going beyond awareness. Kailangan may action din tayo, kasama dyan acceptance and accommodation. Thank you, Anya. Pero sana hindi kita naman na coerce to join.
Of course not.
Sige. So, let's start with the basics. Anya, when Miguel was first diagnosed, did you understand what autism meant?
At the time of Miguel's diagnosis, I was only 4 years old.
Four ka pa lang.
So I did not know what it meant. I knew my brother was different, but I did not know exactly how or why. What I did know pretty early on was that having a brother with autism was going to be a lifelong responsibility and advocacy for me. Eventually, through Autism Society Philippines siblings workshops and talking to my parents, I learned what autism is and what it meant for me to be a sibling of a person with autism.
And that's so common, no? So, let me explain siguro muna. I'll try to explain it in the simplest way possible. Autism spectrum disorder, spectrum siya, 'di ba? So merong iba-ibang symptoms ka talaga na makikita, no? But oftentimes what we see will be difficulties in social communication, kaya may speech delay, minsan hindi titingin sa iyo pag kinakausap, or minsan hindi sila talaga makapagsalita, no? Hindi sila parang walang paki. Sabi nga nung iba, may sariling mundo. Ganun sila dinidescribe, no? Yung social communication difficulties. And ang kasabay nito, meron silang mga tinatawag natin na repetitive behaviors na minsan paulit-ulit. Nakita natin dyan yung nagpa-flap minsan ng kamay, or gusto nila nagpapaikot ng gulong, or sila nagsispin sila. Minsan, marami rin sa kanila, merong mga sensitivities. Kaya makikita nyo, magtatakip sila ng tenga nila, ayaw nila ng ganito, masyadong maliwanag. So, meron tayong mga nakikita ding ganong mga behaviors, mga habits. Pero, importante din, natandaan natin, autism spectrum siya. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, if you've met one person with autism, you've only met one person. Diba?
That is very true, Dr. P. My brother is very different from other kids, other people with autism that we've met.
Siguro Anya, to Dr. P's point din, no? And if you're comfortable sharing, what about your brother? Is it that, many people might not expect, something that, makes your brother unique with his condition?
One stereotype is people usually think that all persons with autism have a special talent or skill like arts, music, or math. My brother Miguel, he does not have a niche interest, and that's partially our fault as his family, because for context, my father passed away 15 years ago, and my mother's been the sole provider of our family ever since. And it takes quite a large sum of money to be able to take care of a child on the spectrum, and let alone actually develop their niche interests or skills. So we were unable to expose Miguel to a lot of activities wherein he could discover what his strengths are. However, I do believe that Miguel's strength lies in the fact that he's very sweet and loving, and he knows when he has done something wrong, so he says sorry po right away. So I think his strengths really lie in the fact that he's very emotionally intelligent.
Oh, wow. And
maganda na nare-recognize yun, no?
Ako, Dr. P, na-appreciate ko yung pagkakasabi ni Anya. Because sometimes it's very easy to focus on what a person lacks. Diba? Yung mga pagkukulang ng tao, how they are different. But I'm really just like so inspired and warmed with how you describe your brother. You know, how he is, strong, how he is very apologetic, how he is also very conscious about other people's feelings. And that's really just beautiful. No? Na parang, and for us to see the beauty in someone who is different,
Yun
right?
yung nakita ni Anya, yung strength ni Miguel, no? Yung pagiging malambing, di ba?
He is so very sweet.
Oo.
Have you always, siguro follow-up question na, have you always had that, like positive view of your brother?
Not always, because it took a while for me to kind of recognize that. Because, growing up with a brother with autism, especially from a very young age, it was a bumpy road. Pero eventually, you learn how to see all of the small victories, the wins, the positive sides to everything, because that is how you get to love them more.
Ang ganda naman nun, Anya. Sabi ko, bawal umiyak. Walang iyak dito. Yan. Pero, sige. Siguro, Anya, kwento mo rin sa amin, no? So, ano ba yung mga first symptoms na nakita nyo or siguro bata ka pa, 4, nahalata ng parents mo or some relatives when Miguel was very young? Kasi marami nagtatanong, di ba? Like, parents ngayon, they're actually very curious. So, ano ba to? Ano yung unang makikita? Paano malalaman na may autism pala yung
And sometimes
kapatid
maybe even
or
like
anak
neurotic
nila?
di ba? Parang makulit lang yung bata. Ay, naku, baka may autism na to, di ba? So, like in the case of Miguel, what were the first signs you
It's like
noticed?
what you said earlier na parang may sarili siyang mundo. When he was a little over 2 years old, yung ninang ko, he tried to call his name and he wasn't responding. My parents initially thought that he had hearing deficiencies kasi hindi siya makarinig. And other signs were yung hand flapping and yung walking on only his tiptoes and yung very limited verbal responses niya. And because he wasn't able to express himself like other kids his age were able to do, he had the tendency to hurt people. He also did not have a very good waiting behavior din for a child of his age. So, yun yung mga signs na napansin ng parents ko before and also like a little after his diagnosis na yes, he does have autism.
Right. Those are typical early signs of autism. And alam mo rin, Doc Jello, ngayon nga, merong parang mga pag-aaral na batang-bata pa lang, meron ka ng ibang nakikitang mga signs very early on. And it's important for parents to recognize this, no? So, ano yung example? Unang-una, speech delay. Meron tayong mga milestones na dapat nahihit pa rin nila, 'di ba? Sinasabi nila, lalaki yan, kaya hindi nagsasalita. Pero regardless of gender, kailangan meron pa rin, 'di ba? So example nito, by 2 years old, 50 to 200 words. So yan, that's an example of a milestone na pwedeng i-check ng mga parents, no? Tapos tinitingnan din natin, minsan hindi sila lumilingon or they will not turn to their name. Tawag ka ng tawag, lalo na pag medyo busy sila, no? Hindi sila lumilingon. And ito, kailangan tignan din to ng mga parents. Kaya ba nung anak nyong mag-point? Yung index finger, yun yung ginagamit na panturo. That's a sign kasi merong mga bata na sa spectrum, hindi nila kayang magturo kung may gusto sila na using the index finger. So, minsan buong kamay, yung papang-abot nila, or kukunin nila yung kamay mo, tapos ilalagay nila yung kamay mo, yung hand leading na sinasabi natin, no?
Around what age yun, Doc?
Mga 2 years old.
2 years old,
yun,
dapat marunong na sila mag-point.
Yeah. Kasi nagko-communicate naman sila. So, yung pagkuha nila sa kamay mo, that's their way of communicating, no? But, yun yung mga pwede nating tignan, parang i-observe sa mga anak natin, ano? And then, syempre, yung mga repetitive behavior. So, in Miguel's case, yung tiptoeing, yung hand flapping, minsan yung pagiging very picky eater, di ba? Yes. Si Miguel din ba ganon?
Dati po.
Dati nung maliit siya, not anymore.
Pero ang daming kids kasi ngayon, picky eaters di ba?
Yes, oo. Ito extreme naman. So, halimbawa, hindi sila talaga, buong pamilya kumakain ng kanin, sila hindi kakain ng kanin. Or amuyin muna nila bago nila kakainin. Or gusto nila lahat red yung kinakain nila. Or lahat malutong.
Yes,
diba?
texture.
Yung crunchy, texture.
So like, see for example, Doc, no? Kasi ngayon yung mga bata gusto nila lagi fast food, fried chicken, French fries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And hindi lang to. Minsan fried chicken, pero yung balat lang yung kakainin. Hindi nila kakainin yung laman, yung malutong na part lang.
Pero Doc, kung bata ako, yun din lang yung gusto ko eh.
Hindi, I will not name a brand, but kasi masarap naman
talaga, di ba?
Malutong na parang
Oo.
melt in your mouth, lutong talaga yung...
Oo.
Yeah. So, importante na kung medyo kinukutuban po kayong mga magulang, importante po is you ask your pediatrician, your preschool teacher, humingi na po kayo agad ng tulong kasi early intervention po talaga yung habol natin dito. Yeah. So, Anya, I know your family went through a journey.
Yes.
Mahabang journey to. Gusto mo bang, okay lang ba i-share mo sa amin yung journey na pinagdaanan ng pamilya nyo?
Yes, of course. So my parents actually delayed his initial consult with his developmental pediatrician because he had an episode of tonic-clonic seizure. That's what my mom says.
So, nag-convulsion siya.
Yes. Eventually, he did get his diagnosis of autism, and at that point, he was prescribed 3 times a week occupational therapy, 2 times a week speech therapy, and a follow-up consult after 6 months. And though my parents saw development after those 6 months, it was not at the pace that the pediatrician wanted him to go at. Their spirits were, I will admit, they were crushed because they thought that Miguel was improving after those 6 months. And that's when my parents thought of going for a second consult with another doctor, one that they chanced upon in the elevator of the hospital and who played with Miguel at a very young age. And that doctor was you, Dr. Tiffy.
Oo nga, sa elevator yata
Ayun
kami
pala.
Yeah, so yun
Oo.
yung,
Chance
chance
encounter.
Chance encounter. Everything happens for a reason.
Serendipity.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, you've been Miguel's doctor ever since, and since you connected with him and my parents, you gave our family and Miguel, in a way, a glimmer of hope for, his development.
Siguro yung tumatak sa akin when you were sharing, Anya, was how it was difficult for you and your family at first. And I guess that is the reality that we have to deal with. I mean, autism is not just a medical condition, no? It's also deeply social and cultural. And I can imagine, no, in many Filipino families, there's often that, like limited understanding that also makes it difficult to accept when someone is diagnosed with a condition like autism. So, how did your family go through that? Like the social and cultural challenge of navigating and accepting a family member with autism?
For my family, my parents, they definitely had a period of grief. But since my father was proactive about it and my mother has been exposed to children with autism because she's a preschool teacher, they were prepared to be parents for Miguel. So they just, went with it like head first, and they said, we're going to be parents to this child. No hesitation. So, yeah.
Nakaka-touch talaga, no? Grabe. And alam mo, I usually see this in parents din, no? Parents going through that grief. Actually, denial nga muna yung iba, di ba? Denial and then grieving. Not because they don't love their child, but because they're mourning the expectations that they had for this child, no? And I think that's part of the normal process. Ang importante po dito, yung, kumbaga, yung moving on talaga. And minsan, sinasabi ko rin to sa parents, minsan it's not the diagnosis. You don't look for the label. Parang ano yung pwede mong gawin talaga. So, hindi yung bakit ba ito nangyari, kasalanan mo to, ganyan, no? Pero ano yung gagawin natin? Ano yung next step? And Anya, parang, well, thank you for sharing ulit, no? Pero, what helped your family make that shift na, sige, sa start, baka hindi naman, but later on, sabi mo nga, si Tatay Bambi, parang, okay, decided na, okay, we have to be parents first to Miguel. Ano yung shift? Saan yung nangyari?
I think what really helped our family make that shift was our love for each other, my parents' love for each other, and knowing that we could rely on each other for anything, no matter what would come in the future.
Wow.
Ganda.
So
Ang laking bagay, di ba?
Oo nga.
And I guess like it's so the medical intervention is very important. But also equally important, I guess, what I'm hearing from Anya is the support, di ba? And the love that we have in our family.
Siya pa rin yung nangingibabaw,
Yeah.
di ba? Parang regardless.
Totoo,
Yung love na
totoo.
yun. Love of parent for their child. And ito nga, sibling for the younger sibling.
Pero Doc TP siguro, kasi Anya, if I may also ask, kasi Anya, you talked about how it was like for your tatay and for your nanay. But you mentioned earlier that you were like 6 or 4 years old when all of these happened. What was you were very young.
Oo.
What was that like for you? Parang did you feel like you grew up too fast? How did you come into terms that okay, I have a brother who has autism?
At first, siguro it felt like, yung parang, if other children, they see their siblings when they're really young as, meron akong kalaro, meron akong best friend, I didn't feel that. And then it slowly transitioned from feeling like I didn't have a sibling who was my friend to feeling like I had to be a parent to this younger sibling very early on in my life. So the transition came with a lot of realizations and responsibilities that I put on myself as well for the sake of my family and my brother.
Yeah. Did you feel na parang tumanda ka agad?
Yeah.
Ganon.
Yes.
Oo nga.
And how do you feel about that? Are there any regrets? Are there
Not that much naman. I mean, I feel like my parents and my family gave me as a complete of a childhood as they could. And although they sometimes say na parang, oh, you're mature beyond your years, you have to grow up fast because these are the cards we were dealt, this is the reality that we have, I feel like this just contributed to my overall character development now. So I have no such regrets.
#character development? Diba?
Galing. Yes,
#character.
laging may choice and you choose to be Anya. Sige, dali. Mag-change muna ako ng topic para gumaan-gaan naman o hindi rin magaan eh. Pero ito kasi yung usual na tanong din na nakukuha natin. Let's talk about the causes of autism because it's actually a huge question that parents will have right after the diagnosis, no? Anya, did your family ever wonder bakit nagka-autism si Miguel? Were those questions also being asked?
My parents wondered what possibly caused Miguel's ASD, like maybe it was something due to the circumstances during Miguel's birth, or other environmental factors. But until now, even in scientific literature, there is no clear reason what causes ASD. So we just accepted it for what it was.
Right. And ngayon kasi, if you look at literature, syempre lagi nilang sinasabi, di ba? It's an interaction of your genes and the environment.
Yes.
And the environment. So, ngayon nga, sinasabi nila, based on sibling studies, may higher recurrence. So, maaring mas mataas yung chances na maulit sa mga younger siblings. Kung yung nauna, merong autism. Sabi nila, umaabot pa yun minsan hanggang 20% recurrence rate. And more, hindi siya isang gene lang, pero maraming genes na lumalabas na responsible daw po sa mga symptoms na nakikita natin sa autism, no? Pero, very clear din, may interaction ito with the environment. Diba?
Yeah. Nature and nurture.
And nurture talaga. So, dati nga naririnig natin yung sinasabi dahil ba to sa mga bakuna. Diba? And na-debunk na yan, yung mga studies na yan na sinasabi nila nung una dahil sa bakuna. Or iba sinasabi nila yung refrigerator moms na parang wala daw pero matagal yun, na-debunk na rin yun. So, hindi yan dahil cold, hindi caring daw yung mga moms. Hindi po yan yung dahilan, ano. Ngayon, lalo na nung pandemic, may lumabas. Sabi naman nila parang virtual autism. Ito, parang nado-document nila yung excessive screen time ng mga bata na parang hindi na sila mamamansin. Or ang nakasanayan nila, halimbawa, kahit Filipino yung buong household magsalita, sila English na mayroong slang. Kasi yun yung nakikita nila dun sa mga gadgets nila. So, merong mga ganon. Pero syempre, Doc J-Lo, gusto bang dagdagan?
Yung
mga
environmental,
environment
yes,
factor.
oo.
Kasi important ngayon, sinasabi natin, yung concept of epigenetics.
That's true.
You can be born with your genes, pero hindi necessary ma-express yung genes na yon unless
The
meron
environment that you are exposed to, no,
Correct.
can sort of like trigger
Right.
the expression or the manifestation of these genetic traits. Pero maganda yun, Doc Tipi, di ba? Parang, kasi a lot of people are caught up in this debate of nature ba yan? Kasalanan ba yan ng mga genes na napapasa mula sa
pamilya niyo ba
magulang?
yan? Or sa side ba namin? Meron mga ganyang
And
tanong
mahirap yun
minsan.
kasi it
Oo.
breeds guilt. It
Correct,
also breeds blaming, which I think no is not healthy. And to your point, no, it's as much nature as much as it is nurture, di ba? And the environment that we are exposed to, not just the kid but also the mom, di ba? While
Yung
they're
pagbubuntis pa
pregnant,
lang, no?
di ba?
Yes.
And even before, no? Now, when we talk about environment, of course, there's the biological and the developmental environment, which is very social, di ba? The interactions, kung paano ka inaalagaan, the kind of parenting, but also the physical and the natural environment, Doc TP. And dito, hindi pa talaga kumpleto yung siyensya, but there are now studies no looking at air pollution. Actually, a lot of the studies, mostly on animals, no? Medyo growing pa lang yung studies on humans, but on animals, nakita nila air pollution, but also heavy metals.
Yes.
Ang dami nating mga heavy metals like lead, arsenic, cadmium, you know, in the different appliances or materials that we use in our day-to-day lives.
Right.
So again, the science is not final on that yet, but
Right.
you know, we
Pero
have to be on the
dumadami.
lookout. Yeah.
Dumadami yung science ngayon. Lalo na, di ba, technology ngayon, parang matulog ka lang, ang dami na biglang lumalabas na mga pag-aaral, no? So, marami pong factors. Pati nga, di ba ngayon, umuulan-ulan, tumutulo-tulo yung bubong. Pati mga molds in the environment, nagpo-produce daw yan ng mga toxins. So, maraming mga factors. And, ang maganda dito, Doc Jello, kasi pag sinabi mong environment or epigenetics, meron tayong magagawa about it.
That's true.
Diba?
Yeah.
Yan. Okay. So, Anya, let's talk about the sibling experience. Kasi, alam mo actually, first time nga ako naka-encounter na parang panel na sibling. Kasi usually parents or yung, di ba meron din tayong mga self-advocates, sila yung usually na nakakausap namin, ano. So, what is it like being a sister to someone or to an adult with autism? And siguro, well, ikaw, kung ano yung gusto mo i-share sa amin.
Okay, so the truth is, it's difficult but fulfilling. I sometimes find it hard to explain to my peers who don't have persons with autism in their lives what it's like. So the responsibles are a big commitment. And although my mother has been really kind enough to try to not make me feel burdened by it, sometimes I just can't help but feel the pressure. It takes quite a lot of effort to care for Miguel on a daily basis, especially when he needs consistent attention. I've heard other siblings of persons with autism express sentiments like, how do they know if their sibling actually loves them if they can't sometimes understand how they're communicating? Why is it them helping their sibling and not the other way around? What will happen when their parents pass away and they're the only ones who are left to take care of their sibling with autism? Or even, why is there so much responsibility put on them compared to children in other families? So these are things I've heard in support groups sometimes. And feelings like these can get emotionally overwhelming talaga. That's why us siblings need workshops and support groups as well. Personally, I'm grateful that there are counselors here in
Shout-out ba
Ateneo.
tayo sa ating mga guidance counselors?
So,
Hello!
yung mga counselors namin sa LSOGC, they have been really helpful, and I'm really thankful that they were willing to help me cope with how I feel about how I am the eldest daughter in a family with a single mother, a father who passed away, and a brother with autism. And because of all of this, though, I'd like to think that I've become such an understanding, resilient, and compassionate person. I see the good in even the smallest joys in life, I'd like to think, which is what you need talaga when you love someone with autism. Big wins are, well, they might be few and far between kasi. So you learn to appreciate the small things more. And that way, you get to love the person with autism more.
Ang galing, ang galing. And you know what, Anya? Unang-una, thank you for the honesty. But also what you described, no? Learning empathy, developing resilience, gaining a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think these are, Doc Tipi, di ba? These are also the kind of skills that we need more in the world. You don't have in general, di ba? You don't need to have a brother with a neurodevelopmental condition to have to learn
We're learning
these
so
things.
much from you, Anya.
And
Parang wow.
ang ganda rin, no? Kasi tama, di ba? Parang minsan iniisip na yung magulang lang ang kailangang suportahan. But
Correct.
yung sinabi ni Anya kanina na, kapag nawala na yung mga magulang, ang mag-aalaga yung kapatid eh. Wala namang ibang mag-aalaga, di ba?
Yeah.
So, and yung point kayo sa like siblings like you, di ba? Can become powerful advocates for inclusion, especially for our brothers and sisters who are born different, di ba?
Right. Pero kailangan din nating tandaan, siblings of children with autism often become invisible children. And parents, kasi yung parents, syempre, lalo na new diagnosis, lahat ng attention biglang napupunta dito sa bata na diagnosed to have autism. Parents are so focused on the child with special needs that siblings' needs sometimes get overlooked. So, how did your parents handle this in your family? Like, nangyari ba to sa family niyo?
Nagselos ka ba?
Yes. As a child, I felt like Miguel got more attention than I did. And there were times when it feels like Miguel would be always the first priority and that I would have to give up stuff for his sake. However, I guess it balanced out then when I got older and I realized that I got to experience more things than Miguel did. He was always kasi at home and he rarely came out to family events because hindi niya kaya talagang sumama. So it was his for his
Na-overwhelmed
sake.
din siya.
Yeah, it was for his sake
Yeah.
din na we thought it best to let him stay at home na lang. So while I got to do everything, I also felt like dapat pagbigyan ko na lang din si Miguel every time because I get to experience things that he does not. And I understand how this is valid naman. But then again, there always needs to be a balance in how parents treat their children, all their children.
Right. Nung mas bata ka ba, mas nahirapan ka ba?
Yeah. But now I have a better understanding and I'm more mature naman din.
Mas mature ka na kasi ngayon, no?
Pero ako, naalala ko nung bata ako, di ba? Parang, I always compare myself kasi, di ba? To my sibling, di ba? Parang,
Bakit siya meron nun, ako wala?
oo, di ba? So, and I guess I'm really just so amazed at you, Anya. Di ba? That even at a young age, no, you already had that interiority and empathy and like really being considerate. I guess it's like having that equitable mind na, parang knowing that
Bata pa lang, alam niya yung concept of equity.
equity di ba?
Oo, di ba?
Oo. Kasi minsan kapag wala kang konseptong equity, Doc TP, parang you will take offense at the fact that, bakit
magkaiba?
Bakit unequal?
Oo, mas madaming atensyon,
Oo.
mas madaming binibili, pinagagastosan, special yung school. Wow.
Yeah.
Oo nga. And I think it's important for parents, yung mga nakikinig sa atin ngayon, importante na madinig din nila si Anya ngayong gabi. Your other children need you too. They need one-on-one time. So, nangyari ba yon? Meron ba kayong date ni nanay?
Yes.
Or na kayo lang? So, importante din po yun, At saka importante din, sineselebrate din po natin yung achievements ng ating mga kapatid, no? They need permission as well to feel frustrated or angry. Kailangan ma-validate din natin yung mga emotions nila. And Anya, what would you tell parents about supporting siblings of persons with autism?
I tell them, please listen to the needs of all your children. If you're willing to get psychological help for your child with autism, you should also be able to do the same for your other children, especially if they expressly need it. Don't let them go unheard or unnoticed just because the responsibility to take care of their sibling falls on their shoulder.
Ang ganda, ang ganda. Talagang lahat, di ba? Para sa lahat. And like autism is not just like an individual, but really taking care of the entire family. Di ba? Now, I think before we move on to our questions from the community, and Dr. P, what I've liked about our conversation so far is that we didn't dwell too much on the clinical. We talked about the lived experience. 'Di ba? Kasi yung sa clinic, 'di ba, parang that's in the doctor's office, but yung lived experience araw-araw yun eh.
Correct.
Siguro Anya, what's one thing na lang, no, that you want people to understand about your brother and with people with autism in general?
My brother, like all persons with autism, is human. He's just like anyone else. He's different, but that has never been a bad thing. There is nothing wrong with him. There is nothing wrong with having autism. He is worthy of acceptance, love, and care just as anyone else.
That's so beautiful, Anya. Galing. And siguro I want to add this lang, no? Persons with autism aren't puzzles to be solved or disorders to be cured. They're people who experience and interact with the world differently. Diba? Lahat naman tayo, iba-iba talaga. And our job isn't to make them normal. In quotation, normal. Ano ba yung normal na yan? It's to support them in being their authentic selves while giving them skills to navigate the world that's designed for neurotypical persons.
Ang gandang point nun, Dr. P, di ba? Parang sometimes we take for granted that there are things around us that weren't really designed for everyone else. Di ba? So, if we can provide ramps for people with physical disabilities, how might we reimagine our spaces, our communities to be more inclusive with disabilities that are not necessarily physical, hindi mo nakikita, di ba? That are more social or behavioral. Now, let's get into the practical questions. Families have, no? Dr. P, I know that you get these questions all the time in your clinic. So parang typical day at Dr. Katipunan clinic, di ba?
Okay, tignan natin. So every single day, let's start with a question many parents ask me. Unusual na tinatanong nila, my child was just diagnosed with autism and he's now 3 years old.
So kapag ganun, Dr. P, ano yung gagawin nila? What should they do?
Yun yung unang tanong, di ba? So usually naman po, pagkatapos pumunta sa developmental pediatrician, actually, kailangan ko rin pong sabihin, no, just make sure that you go to board-certified developmental pediatricians kasi marami rin po ngayon, uso ngayon mga nagsascam din.
Talaga ba, Dok?
Oo, nakakita kami mga fake reports, fake prescriptions, parang nauuso din siya yata ngayon kasi medyo mahaba po, hindi medyo. Mahaba po kasi talaga yung pila sa mga developmental pediatricians.
Gaano kahaba, Dr. P? Parang real talk lang. How long does it take for you to get an appointment?
Sa Maynila, sabihin natin, mga 6 months to 9 months or 12 months. Pag nasa probinsya ka, abot ka pa ng 2 taon.
2
So, halimbawa
years.
sa CDO, mga colleagues namin in CDO, 2 years daw ang pila sa kanila.
Grabe, do.
So, ganun. Kasi matagal po yung konsulta, yung time to consult. At saka, syempre, kailangan po talaga masinsin. Maraming nire-review. Kaya, yun yung nangyayari din, yung mga scenario, no? Pero, well, our society is working on addressing that as well. Pero importante po ang early intervention. Ako lagi kong sinasabi, pwede kang mag-deny, pero kailangan may action po tayo, mag-early intervention, kasi makikita niyo po talaga yung difference pag sinimulan ng maaga yung intervention natin. Yun.
Ayun, no?
Yun muna.
Pero siguro, Anya, ako gusto kong tingin, from your family's experience, because Dr. P talk about early intervention, what early interventions help your brother the most?
For us, home-based applied behavioral analysis, so ABA therapy, worked for Miguel. Because of that, physical therapy and occupational therapy, sumunod na yun, they work for him too. Now though, he just does yung SPED education through online sessions with his therapist.
Yeah.
Home-based
Yes.
siya.
Dr. P, maybe you can also clarify for our listeners yung sinasabi na home-based applied behavioral analysis. Kasi akala ko itong mga interventions, doktor lang ang pwedeng gumawa. Pero may pwede rin palang gawin yung
Kasi
mga
may
parents.
So, yung mga doktor, sila yung mga developmental pediatricians ang gumagawa ng assessment, ng developmental assessment. Pero pagkatapos ng prosesong yun, nire-refer namin sila sa therapist or sa teachers or yan sa yung mga therapist natin, maraming klase yan eh. May speech therapist for communication and language. May occupational therapist kasi ano ba occupation ng bata? Kasama dyan paglalaro. Play is an occupation. So yung tamang way ng paglalaro. Kasama dyan yung behavior in school, 'di ba? So kasama din yon. Tapos pati writing, activities of daily living, ginagawa ng OT. And then meron tayong mga behavioral therapist na kasi 'di ba minsan in autism, yun yung nakikita nating unang symptom, yung behaviors, no? So, yun naman yung kung saan nag-a-action yung mga behavioral therapist natin. And then, syempre sa school. Lalo na ngayon, meron tayong batas for inclusive education, meron tayong regular teachers, meron din tayong special education teachers, regular ed teachers, and SPED teachers.
Especially yung speech, no? Kasi ang laking bagay if maturuan talaga silang makapagsalita, di ba? Because that helps them engage with the world. That's why, shout out po sa ating mga speech and language therapists.
Pathologists, yes.
And
Speech
pathologists.
and language pathologists.
Yes.
Konti lang sila. Para
Konti
silang mga
lang.
unicorn.
Also, shout out to my friend, si Miss Krisa Apostol, who is a speech and language pathologist.
Kailangan
Diba?
mag-refer na kami sa kanya. Sana may slots pa siya. O sige, meron akong isang question dito. Sabi naman ni Maria, my son is a 5-year-old and is currently non-verbal. Will he ever talk? How do I communicate with him? Anya, your brother went through this, right?
Yes, Miguel has what's called speech apraxia. So he cannot, he can say what he wants in a way, and he can repeat statements with guidance, but he cannot carry a conversation with you or tell you a story. He learned how to communicate through years of speech therapy. So he first learned words and then phrases, and then common questions that he has standardized answers to.
Doc Tipi, di ba kasi that's common frustration eh. Kasi di ba, a lot of parents really look forward to the first words of their children. And like when you deal with parents who get frustrated na, Doc Tipi, yung anak ko hindi pa nagsasalita. Like how do you explain that difficulty with autism, like that speech difficulty that you encounter with children with autism?
Kailangan natin kasi ma-differentiate, di ba? Yung speech, ito yung spoken word, yung parang nagsasalita. Ganito, nagsasalita tayo, yan ang speech. Pero marami pong ways of communicating. So, ito naman yung language and communication na sinasabi natin. So, yung iba, kailangan talaga ng, meron tayong mga technology ngayon na ginagamit, no? Or very basic, even babies, di ba, hindi pa sila nagsasalita pero magge-gesture sila. Magge-gesture, magtuturo. So, gestures are also a way of communicating. Or minsan, lalo na pag hindi ba sila nakakapagsalita, they're so frustrated, galit sila sa inyo. Even yung mga tantrums natin, even yung mga parang meltdown na minsan nakikita natin, no? Ano pala sila? Maaring way of communicating din ito. So, marami talagang ways na meron na palang sinasabi sa'yo. Kailangan lang naka-tune in din tayo sa kanila. So, maganda na, I'm sure si Miguel, isang ganyan lang, alam mo na ibig sabihin nun, no? Meron silang ganong special na bond ni ate.
Parang context clues and non-verbal. Non-verbal. Doc Tipi, you mentioned about meltdowns. And actually, our next question from Patricia asks, how do I handle meltdowns? When my child gets upset, and ito daw, it can last for hours. Not just minutes, but hours. And I don't know what to do.
Pawis na sila, nasasaktan na, minsan ganun, no?
Siguro, Doc, I guess this is also a question for Anya and Doc Tipi, no? So, Anya, like, has your brother Miguel experienced this kind of meltdowns? What have you learned? What works for you? And Doc Tipi, what do you also advise your patients in handling meltdowns?
Miguel has meltdowns when you don't give him what he wants or because of sensorial environmental factors like loud sounds. And he can calm himself down when he hears familiar voices. So sometimes we sing to him. And physical touch like hugging him also helps. And of course, redistracting him with screen time on his phone also works for him.
So, parang na-figure out nyo na yung strategies na mag-work for Miguel.
Distraction.
Distraction.
Pero also, effective din yung hugging. Diba? Sometimes a hug is all you need.
Tama.
Nagpapakalma talaga.
Lalo ngayon maulan eh, di ba? Parang...
Hug kita.
Hug.
Sige. So, una kailangan nating malaman, no, yung kaibahan. Ano ba yung meltdown? Ano yung tantrum? So, pag sinabing tantrums, meron silang goal. Meron silang gusto. Kaya sila nagtatantrums. Yun yung, it's a way of communicating when you think of it, no? Ang meltdowns naman, parang na-overload na sila. Neurological overwhelm talaga. Kasi, ang daming sensory input. So, yung iba, di ba, kaya pag parties, maingay, may ilaw, mainit, na-overload sila talaga. So, pag nagme-meltdown sila, ano una natin kailangan gawin? You have to make sure that they're safe. Hindi yung mahuhulog sila sa hagdan or makukuryente sila dahil parang hindi sila kalmado, no? So, yun yung una. Tapos, tignan mo, paano mo ma-reduce yung sensory input na yan. So, yung iba, halimbawa sa mall, pumunta sila sa toy store, tapos talagang maingay, tapos meron silang favorite. So, ang sinasabi ko rin kasi minsan, baka maaring kunin nyo yung bata, itabi natin. Di ba dun sa mga hagdanan sa mall, it's quiet, tapos mas walang tao, hindi kayo pinapanood. So, pwedeng tulungan nyo sila. Yun siguro yung isang pwede nyong gawin para dun siya mag-calm down ng konti, no? And then, minsan, changing the environment will help, no? Taking them out of that overwhelming environment. So, siguro yun yung examples of some things that you can do during a meltdown.
Agreed, Doc. And it's not just, patients or people with autism. Like sometimes, even neurotypical people, they get triggered by the environment. Ako nga, Doc, sobrang init lang.
Oo nga.
Na-adjit na ako, di ba? Or minsan kapag masyadong maingay, like in the mall, when it's too crowded. So, yeah, I think...
Parang yung masyadong dikit-dikit na kayo.
Pagdikit-dikit, di ba? So, lalong-lalo na dito sa Maynila, di ba? Mainit, tapos may traffic, tapos crowded
Maalikabok.
spaces, maalikabok, sa parang si Maricel Soriano, di ba? Madumi, maputek, maingay, di ba?
With emotion pa, ha?
With emotion
Okay,
pa, di ba?
yes.
And it's like sensory overload everywhere. And you don't need to be diagnosed with autism to be overwhelmed with that. But
Correct,
how much
correct.
more, I guess, people with autism. So, sometimes, to your point, kanina, Doc TP, we're not fixing the child. Sometimes, what needs to be fixed is the environment. Right?
Agree ako dyan. So, eto naman. Meron akong isang question dito. Sabi niya, my daughter needs everything to be exactly the same every day. If we change anything, she falls apart. So, how do I help her to be more flexible? This is... Na-experience niyo ba yun? Na kailangan may routine din ba kayo? Meron bang favorite routine si Miguel?
Routine for Miguel was much needed when he was younger. He would have meltdowns if things did not go according to routine, like if we would make a sudden detour on our way to his therapy center. And now that he's older though, he's more adaptive and understanding of changes in routine. What ticks him off now siguro is kapag may doors or windows or kurtina na naka-open lang, hindi siya nakasara. And he is going to ask us to close door, please, close door. And that's not hurting anyone naman if we close the doors or the windows. So we accommodate it.
Oo
Diba?
nga.
Oo.
At saka tama nga naman, isara nyo kasi
Tama.
baka pumasok ang ulan, pumasok
Lumabas ang
ang
aircon,
lumabas ang
ganun.
aircon.
Oo,
So
diba?
pakinggan si Miguel, tama yan. Oo.
And kung hindi naman masyadong major yung hinihingi, di ba? So, we can accommodate these
Correct.
things.
Kaya nga yung-
Tayo yung mag-adjust.
Yes,
di ba?
yes. Yung iba kasi, parang ang gusto nila, wala akong behavior na paulit-ulit. Eh, hindi naman siya nakakagulo, hindi naman siya nakakasakit. So, kumbaga, okay lang yun, di ba? And there are actually some kids, pati yung mga paulit-ulit na behavior nila are actually very calming for them. It's their way of regulating themselves. Yun yung pampakalma nila, kaya nila ginagawa, no? So, importante din siguro, ito, babalik ako dun sa mga routines na paano natin medyo iibahin, how to teach them to be flexible. Minsan, kailangan natin talaga dahan-dahanin, di ba? Meron yang parang way, may mga strategies tayo. Pwede mo siya i-prepare, di ba? Kung halimbawa, traffic talaga dito, sinarado yung kalye. Kakausapin talaga na, we have to pass this way today kasi merong harang dito. So, meron pa rin tayong mga technique, no? And maganda nga yung mga shinare mo din kanina, Anya.
Ngayon, another important question naman, no? Ito, from Elena. Should I send my child to a special school or try mainstream school? I think very practical question, no? Siguro, I guess, like Anya, how did your family deal with that decision? And then, Dr. P, when your patients ask you, ano ba, parang dapat ba special education siya or pwede ba siyang ipilit sa mainstream school? So how did you go about that decision?
My parents would say, if your child can attend mainstream school, edi go. Pero Miguel, though, he needs special education talaga. So ever since he has attended SPED schools and therapy centers such as CURA, Children's Therapy Hub, MedMom, and of course, home-based therapy.
Ako kailangan talaga i-personalize natin base doon sa pangangailangan ng bata. Siyempre sa una, sinasabi natin, ang gusto natin yung least restrictive environment. Kung kaya nung bata sa regular school, meron na tayo kasing batas para sa inclusive education, no? Na dapat hindi talaga nagdi-discriminate sa kanila. So, kung kaya niya sa regular school, then regular school talaga yung proper na placement. However, meron po kasi talagang mga bata na hindi nila kakayanin yung ganong kind of structure. So, kaya ipa-personalize natin. Kailangan ba niya ng may pull-out minsan or kailangan ba talaga fully na sped siya or kailangan ba talaga one-on-one na. So, tinatansya din natin. At saka, syempre, important din po kasi yung goals ng family. Kailangan ma-align natin yun.
Agree.
Yeah.
And since you talked about the role of the government, diba? Dr. P, and I guess this question from Sarah goes to you, no? What support can, I guess, like our government provide for families with autism? Or, I guess, like, are there policies or mechanisms that we can introduce to our society, in schools, in workplaces, that can make it more inclusive and considerate of people who are living differently?
Right. Meron na po tayong mga batas ngayon for inclusive education. And alam nyo, kadalasan, maganda po dito, mga parents ang naglalabi talaga para dito sa mga batas na to, no? So, meron na rin tayong package sa PhilHealth, yung Z package. Ang importante lang po dito na susundan natin, mamanmanan natin yung implementation nitong mga batas na to, pati yung Z package para sa PhilHealth, no? Ang maganda po dito, more and more LGUs are now supporting individuals with autism or yung mga neurodivergent individuals po natin through programs or through financing of some intervention. Siyempre, hindi siya perfect. Malayo pa yung kailangan nating tahakin. Pero, kahit na paano po, konti-konti, we're getting there naman, Doc Jello.
Okay. And I think that's all of the questions that we have.
Yes.
Siguro our next part, Dr. P, mabilisan lang, no? Quick tip, no? One tip that you think you can share with everyone?
Pwede ba ako bago mag-tip lang?
Yes, Dr.
Gusto ko muna mag-plug.
Ay, oo. Siyempre, gusto natin yung mga plug. Oo.
Kasi po, alam nyo, importante po ang data sa field ng autism. So, meron po kaming i-flash dito sa screen ngayon. Kasi dito po kami sa Ateneo, ang Ateneo Autism Study Group. Meron po kaming pag-aaral na ginagawa. I-flash po ni Sir Jojo ngayon ang aming screen. Makikita nyo po kung meron po kayong anak na between 5 to 9 years old, meron po kaming mga data dito na how to get in touch with us. Kasi po, kailangan po nating, kumbaga, aralin. Yun yung mga sinasabi, yung mga inaaral namin yun. Yung mga biomarkers. Kasi 'di ba, meron tayong mga behaviors na nakikita, pero alam natin na may mga dahilan itong mga behavior na to. So, ito yung gustong aralin itong study namin ngayon na funded by the Department of Science and Technology. So, maliit na plug po kung meron po kayong, mag-fit po kayo dito sa inclusion criteria nitong study na to. Nandyan po yung mga contact numbers namin or pwede niyo pong balikan sa Facebook or sa YouTube mamaya.
Yeah.
Ayan.
So parang ayos na, Doc Tipi, kasi di ba tama, if they participate in the study, they will also have access to certain assessments, di
Merong
ba?
access to assessments, to mga lab tests. Yung lab tests po nakasama dito kasi kung out of, di ba, out of pocket tayo, medyo may kamahalan po. So maganda pong pagkakataon po ito talaga na sana makasali po kayo. Imbitahan niyo po yung mga PDAW offices niyo, yung mga LGU, kung masusuportahan din po nila. Kasi minsan trans po yung problema eh, diba? So, meron naman pong, actually meron din pong mapapag-usapan po yan, kumbaga.
Grabe. So, great opportunity from the Autism Study Group ng Ateneo Center for Research and Innovation. But going back to you, Anya, one last tip that you can offer to our viewers.
For those who are siblings of people with autism, learn to love yourself as much as you love your sibling with autism. In order to advocate for them, you can't see them as different from you. Remember that you are equals as children and as human beings. Therefore, you are equally deserving of love.
Wow.
We love you, Anya.
Oh! Yun talaga, anong take-home message? Dr. P, ikaw, what is like one important tip?
Ang dami kong pwedeng gustong itip dito. Pero sandali, ito na lang muna. presume competence. Don't assume that your child does not understand you or is not capable of loving you just because they're nonverbal or seem not to be listening to you. Many people with autism understand far more than they can express. So, kausapin niyo po sila. Don't talk behind them kasi alam nyo po, naiintindihan. Chances are, naiintindihan nila pati yung mga non-verbals nyo. Sabi nga ni Anya, si Miguel is very caring, very sensitive. So, include po natin sila sa mga conversations natin. You want to respect their humanity.
Wow. And ako, Doc, siguro ang nakuha ko rin, wag sila yung mag-adjust. Tingnan din natin kung paano tayo pwedeng mag-adjust. So whether it's schools, no, making some considerations for students with disabilities, providing them proper support. Businesses, di ba? If they can train staff about autism, like especially mga service-oriented, like mga malls, restaurants, movie theaters.
I think ang Autism Society Philippines ginagawa din nila.
Amazing.
Mga sensitivity training
ASP,
na sinasabi
correct.
natin.
And also maybe even higher, di ba? If kaya, di ba? For those who are highly functioning, I think for government talaga, kailangan po natin pondohan at bigyan ng karampatang sweldo ang ating mga therapists, no? Karampatang sweldo. Kasi ang dami sa kanila, ang baba talaga ng sweldo dito. Kaya nangingibang bansa di ba? So mga special education teachers, mga speech and language pathologists, no? And also family support, mga social workers. And I think urban planners. Imagine what if we can make malls, physical spaces, green spaces to be more inclusive and friendly for everyone.
Ganda naman yan, Doc Jello. Sige, nako, malapit na po tayo mag 8:00. Anya, maraming salamat. So, thank you very much for opening your heart and sharing your family's journey to all of us.
Salamat.
Thank you. Maraming salamat. So, any final thoughts bago tayo magbabay sa ating audience for the night?
It's just that I'd like to say that my brother has autism, but autism does not have him. He's so much more than his diagnosis. Yes, our family's journey has been challenging, and maaring your family's journey has also been challenging, but my brothers taught me more about patience, acceptance, and unconditional love than any psychology textbook ever could, and I would not change him.
Aww. So to everyone listening, whether you're a parent, just starting your journey, a sibling trying to understand, a teacher working with students with autism, or someone who just wants to be inclusive, maraming salamat po. Thank you for caring enough to learn.
Really, autism is not a tragedy. It's really just a different way of being in the world. And when we support people with autism to be their authentic selves, when we adapt the world to include them rather than forcing them to adapt to us, like with the story of Anya and Miguel and their family, amazing things can happen.
Okay, so next week po, we'll be talking about asthma. We'll discuss why the factors affecting it. Meron po tayong special guest na aabangan nyo rin po, ha?
And until then, be patient, be kind, and remember, every person, neurotypical or neurodivergent, deserves respect, inclusion, and love.
I'm Dr. Tipi Sumpayco Tanshanko.
And I'm Dr. Jello Apostol from CURA. Stay compassionate and loving, Ateneo.
Magandang gabi po.
Health isn't just about medicine.
It's about care
Community
and conversation. That's why Radyo Katipunan brings you CURA, your campus medical show.
From everyday wellness tips to expert advice on the health issues that matter most to you.
CURA is here to listen, guide, and care
The Ateneo way.
Join us as we talk about healing,
Hope and health right here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
CURA, your campus health companion where care meets conversation.